right now. Hello, YouTube. Sorry about the delay. Just figuring out my Zoom accounts now that I have two of them. Let me just grab this URL and share it with the Discord here. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's been a while, like a month, I think. It's just been a really interesting month. And I'm excited to finally get back to these office hours. Sorry, I'm just closing distractions and stuff. So if this is your first time here, then here, let's go to office hours. Yeah, so this is your opportunity to ask me questions about anything, and I will do my best to answer. I don't promise to have a good answer, but I'll give the best I have. And yeah, we'll just go for about an hour. I give priority to people who are actually in the Zoom call. But if you want to, between meetings or even right now, you can post in the KCD Office Hours Discord. And this is also where I'm going to be posting links and stuff like that too. So I think I need to go. Yeah, I skipped a couple weeks, so I need to find where the last comment was. And then I'll ask for questions from the Discord. Yeah, I think it was right around here. Okay, yeah, so we'll start right around here. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody. All right, Naresh, I noticed, I think that you had a question. Did you post it in here, or do you want to just ask it? Oh, sorry, my bad. I can't hear you. Let me fix my sound. That is not what I wanted to do. There we go.
No, I was on mute too.
Oh, okay. I can hear you now.
All right. So yeah, I have posted it here. It's almost the end.
Got it.
Yeah, right there. Yep.
Sweet.
And it's a remix question, so it's very relevant.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so wait a second. So you want to have this, and you've structured your file system like this?
The file system is structured. The last screenshot is the exact structure there.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, so you've got a layout route here for the authenticated page, and there's how that's defined. And then you want /accounts /account ID, and then like a default when there is no account ID.
Right.
Is that, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see the screenshots there. You can see that when I'm on accounts, I'm showing a left sidebar, the black left sidebar with the accounts listed. And then when I click on each account, I want this overview holdings kind of tab to appear, orders and activity. But what's happening right now is that that particular second screenshot is not appearing inside the outlet. You see, it should be on the right of the sidebar.
Oh, I see. So okay. What's happening? Or let me take a guess. I'm guessing this sidebar is being rendered inside of that index TSX.
In the index.tsx, yes.
Yeah. So if you want that sidebar to remain there, okay. So like first, the reason that the sidebar is getting removed is because when we go to /accounts/ID, we're no longer rendering the index TSX. We're only rendering the index or the ID route. And so that's why the sidebar is removed, because that sidebar is rendered within the index TSX. So if you want to have the sidebar remain there for all of these routes, then you're going to need to have an accounts.tsx, which is another layout route. But this will differ from your _ account authenticated layout route in that it will actually appear in the URL. And so, yeah, you just right next to your settings TSX, you'll put an accounts.tsx, and that's where you'll render your sidebar, and then you'll render the outlet for the stuff that should be rendered inside the index, or when we're at the index and when we're at the specific ID.
Okay, so I think I got that part. Now, when I have a $ID under accounts and it gets rendered as the top toolbar, how do I then, for each tab in there, put a component so that it renders inside that outlet under overview, holdings, etc.? Because now we have $ID, and how do I structure files underneath that?
Yeah. So your $ID doesn't have to be at the end. So you can have accounts, $ID / overview.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah. So to do that, you would just create a another directory in here called $ID, and then / under that directory, you'll have overview, holdings, orders, activity.
Okay. I've never seen a $ID as a folder.
Yeah. So you can do that with Remix. Nested routing.
Interesting. This is one of the most confusing aspects so far when you're trying to do this.
And it's my fault because I'm in charge of the docs, and the docs for the file name conventions are really bad. I need to spend some time on this because having just a bunch of bullet points is not how you write docs for this.
I think there is one confusion that I keep on having is, routes are routes, like /something, etc. And then when they map to files, what do you actually call them? Are those called layouts? Because there is also a distinction between a layout file versus a non-layout file. So that's part of my confusion.
Yeah, we need to solidify what because for a long time any parent route we would call a layout route, but then we created the concept of a layout route, which is one that does not appear in the URL, like your double underscore authenticated.
Exactly.
So we need to do better at making that distinction, and we do have this routing page, but as you can see, we have to do. We need to finish this, but there is a routing guide, and eventually we're going to add a lot more to this to help clear this up. Because I've seen a number of people have similar questions here.
And I think this is a tough concept to explain because there is so much variability going on. You can do things one way or the other way, and there are like I don't know. Maybe it's in my mind that there are two ways of doing it, but maybe you can just look at that and say this is the only way.
So I wouldn't say that there are multiple ways to do the same thing necessarily. Like there is a right way to do what you're trying to do. It's just there are so many things that you can do. It's finding out which is the right way for what you're trying to do. So like, for example, if you wanted to have this sidebar only appear on the index route, then what you're doing right now is the correct way to do it. But you don't want that. So like what I'm saying is this is not a bad thing, like that you can do it this way. It's just that for your use case, in particular, you don't want to do it this way. And so you have to, or you don't want this behavior. And so you have to do it a different way. And so there are lots of things that you can do. And it's just a matter of figuring out, given all of the things that I can do, how do I do the thing I want to do?
Right.
And again, that's my fault because I need to work on the routing. But have patience. This is only my second week. There are a lot of docs here.
We are very patient.
What I think I need though is this in particular needs a lot of images to like show visually. Here's the routing structure, and here's how you would structure that with the file system. And here's what the UI would look like. Here are the different files that are in control of the different parts of the UI. I think that's what I need to do. I just need to, it's on my list.
Okay, thank you. I trust that it'll be done.
And thank you for your patience. This you don't have these sorts of problems with a framework that's been around for 5 years. So by jumping on board with a relatively newer framework, you're taking yeah, you're on the bleeding edge a little. Well, I wouldn't call it the bleeding edge anymore, but yeah, you're definitely leading edge. So, cool.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I'll give it a shot.
Awesome. Cool. Anybody else in the Zoom have a question that they want to ask here?
I have one more, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
So the Tailwind setup in Remix is kind of odd because it talks about, using CLI, and it doesn't, I'm new to Tailwind, so I can't understand if I want to customize, should I go to the Tailwind config file and customize it? Or should I do the CSS file where you have, at Tailwind kind of things, and then you do something else there? But looks like if I do that approach, then, the way the docs have been written, the generated Tailwind CSS file should be ignored from pushing to, GitHub. It's in .ignore. But to be able to, customize it through the .css file, that becomes a source file. So I don't know what's the right workflow to kind of tame this Tailwind thing in Remix.
Yeah. So in answer to your question, or to the problem of, well, it's ignored, but now it's a config file, you actually should put that that file in what I do is I put it in a folder at the root of my repo called styles. And this is where I do the @Tailwind stuff, is inside there. And then I configure post CSS to build from there into the styles within my app.
So that's interesting. So you are actually using post CSS, although the docs are using the CLI.
Yeah, you could do the Tailwind CLI too. Yeah, okay. And then I do most of my config in the Tailwind config here.
Got it. And where does the output go?
Yeah, so the output goes into the app directory under styles, and they're ignored. So when you're building it, it builds into there. And then my root brings those in right here. So we've got all the styles that I build, and then I add those as link tags.
Got it. And just really quickly, what is the difference between the Tailwind config file and the Tailwind CSS file? If I want to customize, where do I go for customizing?
Yeah, you want to customize it in the Tailwind config file. The CSS file is pretty much just, well, and actually I don't know about the Tailwind CLI. I use post CSS, and so I use a Tailwind plugin for post CSS, and so to get Tailwind to actually do stuff, I need to have this Tailwind CSS file to say which of the Tailwind classes I want to have in my final output. Yeah, right now the CSS story for Remix is actually really great if you want to just do vanilla, but it's a little it needs work if you want to do anything other than that, because you have to kind of do this thing out of band to build into the styles directory that so you can import and stuff. And there are a lot of tools that can do that. It's just we're so used to being able to just import a CSS file, and now magic happens, and I don't have to think about anything else. The problem with that is it makes it really messes up your network tab, and leads to a less optimal user experience. And so we're starting with this where everything is kind of on the outside, and you build into a styles directory so we can link to it. Eventually, we may actually just build in Tailwind into Remix, or at least some sort of post CSS thing. But yeah, right now, this is sort of the thing you have to do.
Okay. But I don't think you quite answered my question. So you have this file right now, tailwind.css. You have a bunch of stuff in here. You also have a Tailwind config file, which allows you to customize a bunch of config. How do you decide whether stuff goes in the config file or it goes into this Tailwind CSS file?
Yeah, so I decide it based on what I need to do. So there's not a lot you can do to configure Tailwind in this CSS file. Like I can't change what colors there are and what the paddings are and what variants are available, all of that stuff in the CSS file. So pretty much like I'm not configuring Tailwind here. I'm just saying what parts of Tailwind do I want in my CSS? Do I want the base styles? Do I want the components? Do I want utilities and screens? Like that, this is me using Tailwind. And then the config file is me configuring Tailwind.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. I noticed there's Kasun. Did you have a question?
Yes, Kent. So my question related to testing library. So we recently migrated from Enzyme testing library, and then we get some errors intermittently due to like having kind of a leakage from the previous vendor to the next one. When that happens, the testing library throws an error saying found multiple elements with whatever the selector. So then I just like did a quick Google search and found that there is an issue like this kind of thing could happen with like if we have used like lazy loading or suspense. I found this issue in the testing library before, which says this kind of thing could happen if we have used lazy loading or suspense. So how my question is how this kind of like leakage could happen, like some last like rendered output from the last test case appears on the next one. Is my question clear? Or?
Yeah. I think I understand your question in principle. So like, I guess I'll restate it. Your question is, how do we make sure that we keep our tests isolated from one another when we're doing stuff like lazy loading?
Yeah.
So the way that you do it is you make sure that your test doesn't finish until your component is done doing everything it needs to do, or you make sure that the component or you force the component to finish doing everything it needs to do before continuing on to the next test. So when your test is finished, there should be nothing left from what your component is doing. So if you have some sort of interval that is set up or something, your component should have a way to clean up that interval when that component is unmounted. And so you should just make sure that that happens. If you're doing lazy loading of components, that should actually happen within the scope of what you're actually testing, because it's not like it's loading over a network or anything. So I haven't actually seen an instance where there was a lazy loading component, like a React lazy component that tried loading after my test was complete. But if that's what you're actually, I can imagine a couple scenarios where that could be the case. If that's what you're experiencing, then you just need to make sure that your test waits for that lazy loading to finish before it proceeds to, or before the test finishes. So this involves rendering the component and then using maybe a wait for or a find by query that waits for that component to actually render. And if that component is kind of outside the scope of your test, you're like, I don't care about the component. I'm worried about this other thing that this component is doing, not the child that it's lazy loading or whatever. Then you have a couple options. You can either acknowledge the fact that your users are going to have to deal with that, and so your test probably should too. Even though you don't want to, you should for confidence reasons. But if you really don't want to, then you can mock out the module so that it doesn't end up actually lazy loading anything. Yeah, like I said, you really should just embrace the fact that your users are going to have to experience that, and so your test should deal with it too. But yeah, the solution is to make sure that you are waiting for your component to do everything it's supposed to do, or force the component to finish what it's doing before continuing to the next test. But the reason you're having problems is because the component's still doing stuff after you're done.
All right. Okay.
Does that help?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else in the Zoom call have a question?
I have something that's might be related. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can.
All right. Well, first of all, go Team Yellow. I have something related, and I'm sure you picked this up quite fast, Kent. But I'm trying to test a component that uses that updates state on animation end. And I have this sweet animation, and it takes too long for any of the stuff that's in that comes out of the box in React testing library. It just times out before the animation actually happens, right? And since it times out before the animation happens, and my state update, which removes the component from the DOM, happens in animation end. How do you deal with that? Does that make sense?
Yep. Animations is one of the exceptions that I make for mocking. I never want to wait for an animation in my test. So there needs to be some way to speed it up. And so I have actually a clarifying question. Is your animation a CSS animation, or is it a JavaScript one?
A CSS animation.
Yeah, I'm actually what's actually probably happening, or what's possibly happening, is the CSS animation never actually occurs in the testing environment, and so that's why the animation end never gets called, because well, it just depends on how you've done it. But for if it's like in a regular CSS file or something, then unless you're loading that into the test document, that CSS animation will never take place. Now, if you're using CSS and JS, then maybe it still is, and it's just taking long. Are you using CSS and JS, or is it a regular CSS file? I think have you muted yourself? I can't hear you. Can anybody hear me? Is it my internet connection that's down?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, we may have lost you, but I will just continue so you can watch the live stream later if you've fallen out. So in any case, whether the CSS animation is actually running or not, it doesn't make too much of a difference on what you do about it. So yeah, basically you need to find a way to make it so that the animation does not happen in the test environment, because you don't want to wait, even if it was only 1 second long. You don't want to add 1 second to everywhere that this component appears, and you're waiting for that animation to finish. And so there are a couple of approaches to this that I can imagine. If it were a JavaScript animation, most animation libraries have a global configuration to just disable all animations, primarily for testing purposes. And so if that were it, then you could use that. You could also mock the module that does the animations. I've done that before too. But since it's a CSS animation, assuming that it actually is happening, that it actually occurs. Well, actually, let's assume first that it's not happening, and so it times out because there is no animation end, because there is no animation. So in that situation, you could either inject some CSS into the document that creates the animation, and just make it happen in 0 milliseconds. I actually am not sure whether that even works in JS DOM. I'm actually very curious. I've never dealt with this in JS DOM environment before, but if it does, then that's what you would do, is you just put some CSS into some fake version of that animation into the document before rendering the component, so that the animation happens instantly, and that animation on end event gets fired. If you are using CSS and JS, and the animation is getting loaded in, and so therefore the CSS animation is actually running and it's in the document already, then I was going to say you could just inject some higher priority CSS into the document, but if it's CSS and JS, then it's basically impossible to guess what the CSS class name is going to be, and so you wouldn't be able to target it anyway. And so, man, yeah, that's kind of tough.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to figure out whether or not the animation occurs in the DOM is to set the animation to 1 millisecond, right? Because that will still go into the loop, and then you can test whether or not that's happening. And if you can't test that, then you have to, if you still want to keep the test, which you do, you probably want to change it over to JavaScript.
I wouldn't say that. You don't have to change it to JavaScript. Please keep CSS animations if they can be done with CSS. That it's better that way. But I think that there should be a way, like, I would rather keep the CSS. Actually, really quick, are you using CSS and JS with like style components or something?
No, I'm just using old school SAS.
Oh, cool. That makes this easier. So you could just inject. Well, my guess then is that the animation's not happening unless you were injecting the CSS into your test environment. The test environment probably doesn't have your CSS, so the animation's not happening at all, which means this is a lot easier because all you will have to do is before your test happens, inject like 2 lines or 3 or 4 lines of CSS into the document. Like you'd say document.head or create a style element and set the style contents and then stick that style sheet into the document right before you render. And all it does is it targets the thing that's animating, and it says it gives it an animation that happens instantly so that the animation end fires. I think that would work. Now, this does come with the assumption that JSDOM will run those animations. It's possible, and that it will fire those events. It's possible JSDOM doesn't support that. I've never tested something like that before. So I'd be very interested to hear the result there. But yeah, so go ahead and give that a shot. And if JSDOM does not support running animations and firing those end events, then your recourse is, I mean, you could update JSDOM to do that. I'm not sure how reasonable that would be. Or you can just put this test in Cypress, like in an actual browser that would run the animations. And in the Cypress environment, I can't remember, but I'm pretty positive they have mechanisms for speeding up animations as well. Because yeah, you don't want to wait like 5 seconds for a really cool animation in a test. So does that answer your question?
It gives me something to do.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not an answer. Like I never promised good answers. Just that I would try. So yeah, good luck. And I'd be very interested to hear the outcome. Especially, I'm really curious whether JSDOM actually supports running those animations and firing those events.
I'll look into it and then I'll write something up.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Anne. All right. Sweet. Anybody else in the Zoom have a question, or should I go to Discord now? Always got to give an extra second for people to find the unmute button.
I have another one, if that's okay.
Go for it. Yeah, you're here, so you get priority.
Looking to do code review on new projects or older projects. Do you have like a process of how you go through it, or like your thoughts on how to start it if you're in a project or in doing code review, or if you're just kind of a little bit on the side?
So you mean like you will review other people's code as like a consulting thing or something?
Or just as an adjacent team looking at each other's code.
Got it.
I guess that's kind of the same situation.
Yeah. You know, I don't have a whole lot to say, like very profound stuff to say about this, but I had a really great episode of Chats with Kent. Was that? I guess it must have been season 3. Yeah, here it is, with Dr. Michaela. Yeah, I actually, I think I'm saying her name wrong. I forgot. I probably said it wrong on when I introed her too. But yeah, she has done lots about code reviews, and she also even does corporate training too on successful code reviews. And yeah, she's also a doctor, so there's that. That's cool. So yeah, I would recommend listening to that and seeing what you can get out of that, and then maybe you could reach out to your boss and say, hey, let's hire her to give us a training on code reviews or something. Because I don't really have too much to offer. Like, you know, install prettier, or make the robot deal with the stupid things so that your code review can be more useful. So yeah, don't bother talking about spacing or things that like a linter can catch. Just make a robot for all those things. And then, yeah, read everything that you can find by Dr. Michaela. Yeah, I think it's Michaela. Yeah, I think it's Michaela. But yeah, good luck on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to go to Discord. If you're in the Zoom then and you have a question, feel free to interrupt me. So I think we were back up right here with Peter. So I'm going to reply to this so they know that I finally got around to answering their question. In one of the React performance lessons, you have a Twitter from Dan, regardless of dispatch down. I'm still not sure I understand what Dan means here. Okay, answering this now. So yeah, I actually removed this pattern from the next branch of Epic React because I don't think it's that useful of a pattern. But yeah, the pattern kind of came out of a conversation that I had with Dan. And so I'm not gonna bother. Oh, happy birthday, Marquez. That's cool. I'm not gonna bother explaining. I've been following Marquez since he was like a kid, doing tech stuff on YouTube. I followed him before he was cool, and now he's like super cool. I want to be his friend. I feel like I am his friend. His videos are just that kind of video. He's great. Yeah, okay, so I'm not going to bother explaining what this pattern is, because you don't need to know it if you don't already know what it is, because it's really not very useful in many contexts. But basically, the benefit is that you can have so you've got this use reducer that has a bunch of dispatches and whatnot, and things that it does based on, or state changes that it can do. And you have that in one file, and it exports the provider and everything. But then you can also export some utility functions. So sometimes there are dispatches that are going to happen in sequence, like you're creating a new user. And so you're going to dispatch that it's being created, and then you go fire off the fetch, and then you dispatch that it was created, or dispatch that there was an error or something like that. And there are like lots of different scenarios like this. So what Dan was suggesting is that you can have a helper method for those sequential dispatches that need to happen. And then you can expose that helper method as like a module level method. And the benefit of that is, rather than just sticking it into context, is that people don't need to put that in a dependency array. And so all they have to do is pass your utility the dispatch function, and then and whatever arguments, other things it needs to dispatch, creating a new user or whatever. And then you can, the utility can manage all the dispatches and stuff. And that works. And the benefit there is then you can take these utilities and you can code split them, and you can put them in different bundles, so they're not all loaded just for the app to load. That was like the big, like, this is why this is great. So I taught that, and like there real examples. I never wanted to teach a pattern that there wasn't real examples of this. So the dev tools actually do this, the React dev tools. But by golly, it's useless. Yeah, it really, there's not a whole lot of great use cases for it. They do exist, I suppose, but yeah, I would not use this pattern. yeah, at all. So anyway, that's what that's all about. Hopefully that helps, Peter. Jesse, you're next. Answering this now. No, yeah, now. There we go. Okay. Do you have any experience with micro front ends? No. If yes, what kind of solutions? Yeah. So I have no experience with it, but I do understand it at a high level. So I will do my best to answer. Okay. So we've got myapp.com hosts integration or container app with navigations using React Router. You can navigate to micro front ends. For example, page 1, which upon arrival will fetch remote JS from that team, inject itself into the DOM. And yeah, for the user to see, moving between different micro front end pages in the navigation will mean that the previous micro front end component will unmount. And if you had saved progress on that page, it will get cleared unless persisted it somehow to, yeah, somewhere. Have you seen any good solutions for these kinds of issues? No need to get into detail. Okay, so I understand the problem. I don't understand why getting it persisted into, you know, local storage of the database is a big problem. So like if somebody has progress on something and they decide to go to a different app, then they probably didn't care about that progress. Or what's more likely what you're talking about. So in that case, like you don't need to bother saving it, or you can like warn them before they navigate away. Or what's more likely is I'm working through this, I'm halfway through my progress, and then to continue or to finish, or to like I need to, you know, go create an account. Oh, you don't have an account for this thing, so you need to go create an account and come back. So in that situation, it makes perfect sense to me to persist the progress. And yeah, you could do local storage or IndexedDB or something like that. Just store it in the browser. If this is the type of thing where you're like, oh, I'm going to go do something, I'm going to come back and then finish. I don't see any reason to like why that would be a problem to just persist that, go and come back. And if it's something where it's like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do it later or something, but we want to save your progress, then yeah, put it in a backend DB. And I don't really see a problem with that either. So it's possible I'm just misunderstanding your problem, Jesse. But those are the approaches that I would take without having any exposure to what you're talking about. So hopefully that is helpful to you, Jesse. Good luck. Okay, Mattia, I'm going to answer your question. I'm commenting on all these people's things to so that they know that I'm answering their questions. Oh, and actually, Mattia, this is kind of out of date or yeah, old. So yes, we did unofficially release Remix like weeks before. In fact, back in October, Michael Jackson removed the token checking from the Remix install. So you were able to install Remix like back in October without having a token. So yeah, there you go. And actually, I also shared my token publicly on my blog for like back in September or something. So yeah, I mean, sorry about that. Okay. Yep, I ghosted you all. I'm sorry. Okay, how would you measure someone's React skills on an interview? Yago, good question. So what I always did, I didn't like, so interviews are the worst. Nobody likes them. And I think that interviewing somebody for a specific technology, like skill in a specific technology, is not always the best approach because technologies change and whatever. And maybe they are a great engineer, they just haven't happened to have experience with this particular thing. And so what I would do, sorry, this notification thing is bothering me. What I would do is I would say, tell me what you're really good at. What is the thing that you're just like the best at? You're really good at this thing. And often when I was at PayPal, I would often say, I'm really good at React. And I'd say, great. Now let's see what it means to you to be really good at something. So like I found the thing that you say you're the best at. Let's see how good you are at that thing. And that will self-select for, I don't have to bother asking them CSS trick questions or some like esoteric JavaScript thing. Sometimes people could say that like, I'm really good at CSS. And if they ever did that, then I'd say, okay, well, let's build this layout or whatever. nobody ever did. I only had people say that they were really good at React, which I find to be quite fascinating, actually. But so I always would just say, okay, sweet, let's start with something really easy. And like, I want you to show me how good you are at React. So I'd start with something really easy. I'd say, build me a counter component. Just all I need is a button that has a number in it. And every time I click on that number, it increments by 1. Build me that. And you would be surprised the number of people who could not do that. They say, I'm really good at React. That's the thing I'm best at. And I'd say, okay, build this. And they couldn't do it. And that would tell me a lot about, well, if this is what you're the best at and you can't do this, then you're not going to fit into this senior dev role that we have open right now. Sorry. We hired a lot of juniors too, and had a really good success, but like, even a junior should be able to do that if they say they're really good at React, right? So, yeah, so that's how I did it. I very rarely got past that. Like if they get through the counter component pretty easily, then we just add complexity. So, okay, I want to increment to increment. Okay, now I want to persist this into local storage. And we just keep going. I didn't get very far with most people, but even because like it does take time to talk through some of this stuff, and you only have them for like an hour. So, but you can tell pretty quick how good of a handle they have on stuff like state and side effects, that sort of thing. So like when I was interviewing, we didn't have hooks. This was before hooks came out. And so it was always with class components and stuff, but like state and side effects still applies there too. So yeah. And I just realized that I already answered this.
Yeah, the counter component, that's similar to what I do. I do like a counter that evolves into like a stopwatch kind of thing. And then like the steps is create a counter and then increment by 1. I'm like, now I want the counter to start when the component renders. And then I get to see if they know about side effects, cleanup, use effect, dependency array. And then like I want you to start, and I want you to be able to stop it, and then start, and then reset. And then the final step is I want you to get all this logic and then create a custom hook that exports like all this piece of logic. But yeah, it's hardly past like the counter state.
Yeah, you don't need to go very far, I think, into something really complex to get a good idea of how good of a handle people have on React. The biggest challenge is making sure that they feel comfortable developing software in that environment, which is basically like impossible. So because like when you really want this job and everything's on the line for you building a counter component, you're not going to perform to the best of your abilities. But I'm mostly listening for what are they talking about. And I always tell them, like, you can totally Google stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it always comes back to, you told me you're really good at React, and that's like the thing you're best at. So show me how good you are. That's what I'm looking for, is like, I just want to see how good you are at what you say you're really good at. I feel like, so we hired a lot of people that I said, yep, let's hire this person. I wasn't the only person who interviewed them, and they all did stellar. And we hired one person that I said, nope, I don't think we should hire them. And they all said that we should. And that person did not do well. And so that was very validating for me. So I don't know, like it's very difficult to do interviews, but I feel like I did a pretty good job with them. And that's what I did. I just really want to bring it back to, show me how good you are at the thing you say you're the best at. And then do everything that I can to make them perform as well as they possibly can in a stressful environment. And that's all that you can do.
Yeah, I'll try that out. And also, funny thing, that the current job that I'm now, my interview question is like to create a use the bounce callback hook, which is like that one where you use latest ref. I was like, okay, this is my wheelhouse now.
Yeah, that's funny. That one would be like more of an advanced topic, I think. I don't think a lot of people would just happen to know the use latest ref pattern or the problems that you face when you make a debouncer. So I don't think that I would ask that one personally, unless the person, like, if the person just flew through the counter thing and I'm like, oh, this person gets it, I would skip all the other stuff and jump straight to, all right, so you've been around, let's see what you can do with the debounce. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't do that with somebody who's kind of, who, like, starting with the counter is just a really great way to see, okay, where is this person at? Like, they could be anywhere. Where are they at? Like, the counter kind of gives you an idea of how comfortable they are with React.
Yeah,
so.
I usually ask them how comfortable they are with it.
Yeah,
have a lot of experience, and like, okay, I'll start based on what you say, and then build up on that, and then you can see.
Yeah, I found, and I also do that and recommend doing that too. Just asking them how comfortable they feel. Most people said that they felt really great, and they were just like, they felt really confident with it. I did not have very many people who were honest about how good they were with React. Like, most people were like, yeah, I'm super comfortable. I built some cool stuff. And then I give them a counter and they're just like really scratching their head on it. I'm like, I need somebody on the team who can say, you know what, this is not my strongest thing. Like, or I'm just not really, I'm still learning, or like, I need to be able to trust you when you say that you're really good at something. Just had so many people who were just dishonest and said, oh yeah, I'm super great. I mean, maybe they just have a different standard or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just say, oh, I'm really confident. Like, okay, let's start. And then as soon as I start, I see some people that start to backpedal a little bit on what they said. Oh no, because I haven't
yeah. Yeah. Okay, so my Discord just crashed, but I'm pulling it up again. Here we go. Okay, cool. So yeah, if you ever if you ever know that you're going to come and interview with me, just make sure you review your counter components. That's all, I guess. Okay, cool. Let's continue. I probably will go over today because I missed like an entire month of office hours. So Tiger answered your question. So I will continue past that. Yep, this is where I was just crazy busy working on the tutorial, people saying, being nice and everything, so thank you. Okay, this is, I think her name is Mithi, is asking, yeah, submit a first recorded call. I did see it. Here, let me just mention, answering this now. I did see it, and I'm going to record a response today. So I had a little bit of a backlog that I'm going through. Okay, so the question is the improved performance of React forms. Yeah, so an example, submitting this form successfully will still retain the current value of the fields. I want to make it so that when the server response says the form is not submitted successfully, form will have the current values, so as it is today. But if the response says it was successful, then the form fields, we want them to be blank again. So yeah, there are a couple of ways to do this. The easiest way to do this is to, let me just pull this open. Yes, I trust this domain. We all should trust it because it's great. Huh, that's weird. It should have this big banner that says that it's on sale. Oh, but that's probably because I'm logged in. Yep, it's on sale right now. Go buy it. So let's look at our form. There we go. So right here, the easy way to do this is to set your form to have a key prop that changes when you want to reset the form. That's an easy way to do this. Another way that you can do this is, well, I think you can do it this way. Pretty sure you can do it this way. You have a ref on the form and you call reset on that form. So let's see, I just need to find a form somewhere. This is probably a form. Yeah, where's my form? Oh my goodness. It might not be a form. Query selector. Oh, let's just get all the forms. There's only one form and it is this. Wow. Okay. Anyway, there it is. So if I type in something in here and then I say, there's my form, reset. I thought it would reset. Maybe they're doing something weird. Pretty sure that should work. But if it doesn't, then the key prop should definitely work. I feel like there was something else that I was going to say. No, I would just do the key prompt. So you put a key prompt on here, and when you want to reset the form, you just reset it. The key prompt can be anything. It can be a number that you just stringify. But what the key prompt will do is it will tell React, hey, I'm rendering something and it's different from the thing that I had before, so don't reuse that DOM. Unmount the whole thing and mount it over again. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do that. Yeah, this is kind of a fun blog post. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, where's that form? It's in here somewhere. Yeah, so you just put a key prompt right there. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Good luck. And in a remix context, you'd basically do the same thing. Use the key prompt. Often, you're going to navigate away from the form, but yeah, there could be like a form where you can enter a bunch of entries in rapid succession or something. And in those situations, when there's this, like if it's, I'm going to be able to enter a bunch of things, make sure that you're managing focus state. So when they submit it, it goes back to the first entry. So they just keep on going. So yeah, anyway, good luck. Okay, sweet. Share your videos, make a video in Webpack. Yeah. I mean, I've got, let's see, I think I may even have Egghead Webpack, maybe a short URL for that. Yep, there it is. So here's everything that I've got on Webpack. But keep in mind, here, we'll do the short URL, Egghead Webpack. But keep in mind that this is all very old, updated 5 years ago. So don't watch this. I mean, you're welcome to if you want to, but here, I should probably comment, add that as a comment. Note, this is very old, don't watch. Unless you want to just for nostalgia purposes. Yeah. I don't really have anything, sorry. Yeah. I mean, I think I had something on front-end masters as well, but they had Sean Larkin come and redo it. His is probably much better. Here's an idea. Don't configure Webpack yourself. There are very few reasons to do that now. Use Remix, and you're not even using Webpack. So yeah, use Remix. That's what you want. Okay, Thomas is asking, I find wait for and find by very easy to abuse because if this happened to be able to run synchronously, you get no warning. I don't actually see a problem with this. I don't know. Yeah, answering now. Yeah, I personally think that it's no big deal. It's not gonna like make your test take any longer or anything. Some people argue that you should do this for everything because it's kind of an implementation detail that anything runs synchronously at all. So I mean, that's an argument. I'm personally not going to do anything about this, but if you want to open an issue about it and discuss it with the current maintainers, be my guest. But I really don't think that it's that big of a deal. So yeah, as you said, it may not be worthwhile. So okay, Murillo. Hello, Go Blue team. I have a question about compound components. I'm going to post a final version of the exercise as you can recall it. And another version, what I would think I would do if I face the problem. I'm not sure I understand the benefits. So here's our toggle. It consists of a couple different components. This one will render when it's on, this one will render when it's off, and here's the button itself. There's the implementation. That is less interesting. What we're talking about is what API does this expose? So when we're talking about patterns, we're thinking about what API can I expose, at least this pattern in particular. So if we were to do it this way, then this is the API it exposes. So here's the problem with this API. You are in control of rendering. So you control the message that shows up, you control the switch. So that means that I, as a consumer of your component, can't say, I want the message to render below the switch. And so if you wanted to stick with your API and you wanted to say, hey, I want to allow users to be able to render the message below the switch, then you would have to have another prompt that says render below switch. And then you'd have to document it, you'd have to test it, all of that nonsense. and I as a user would have to learn it. Whereas with this API, if I wanted to render the content below the switch, then I don't have to learn anything. There's no documentation for it because it's clear how I would do that. I would just move this up. And so that's one thing. If let's say, like in a more complex example, like we have a menu or something, if I wanted to disable a menu item, then I can do that directly on the component. I don't have to have some sort of config object or something like that. So it's all about the API that's exposed and the control that I have. Another thing with this here is if I wanted to add something between the message and the switch, or maybe something after the switch that's not the message or whatever, like I have no control over that. And if you wanted to allow me to have control over that, then you'd have just this big mess of props for what is a simple toggle. And this gets exacerbated as you build up like something that's more complex than just a toggle. So that's the benefit of compound components. So hopefully that helps answer your question. I will mention that I just answered this now. Okay, cool. So Matthias shared a post, so thank you for that. And we talked about Naresh's question. Yago, you've got another question. How would you step up a form component that has some common fields, but depending on the context? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I mistyped it, setup.
Oh, setup. Oh, yep, that makes sense. I was like, step up. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe we'll get more context. But yeah, setup makes more sense. Has some common fields, but depending on the context, can have different validation and additional fields. Let's say it can have 20 different contexts. Whoa. And where the submit payload can be different depending on the context. Whoa. Yeah. That sounds complicated. Yeah. So what you do, here's how you do anything where you're like, I want to reuse this. You duplicate it everywhere, and then you look at all the duplication that you have. And like with 20 different contexts, you probably don't need to do it everywhere. Just do a couple of the contexts where you're like, here are maybe put the different contexts in different buckets. So you have like 4 buckets. Okay, so let's re-implement the everything, duplicate everything in those 4 buckets, those 4 different contexts, and then see what things are shared between those things. Like there, and it may be pretty low level stuff like, oh, well, we've just basically got our input that's shared or whatever. And share that, then see how nice that looks with your duplication. There may be some additional things that you can share there, but really push against hasty abstraction. And then duplication is fine. It makes it so much easier to make changes in the future. So, I mean, there's probably more to this problem that I'm not seeing, but that's how I think about abstractions when I'm like, I'm not sure how to abstract this. And it's getting like, normally I'll start trying to abstract it early and I'll realize, wow, this is getting really complicated. Let's back out of this, start over and just duplicate everywhere and then find the commonalities after. And that typically leaves me with a better abstraction. Do you have more context for me, or is that a good way to start for you?
Yeah, that makes sense. I built an abstraction and I was like, well, this is way too complicated. But the idea is because there's people that don't have like the context. They need like a CMS kind of thing where they just put some configurations and onboard something, which should be easy for the people that don't have context into React. So like that's one of my constraints. So I was thinking like maybe I can make something that's easy to copy and have like any number of copies of that. And I was thinking maybe since we're using Formic, to use like Formic context and then have a common form, and then maybe a function to like a high order function to create like a form that takes in the basic form or like just in setting as like a slot. And then you can just get through the context and use like the use field context stuff, and then have any copies of that. And you can have the additional fields related to the current context.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with that is when you're like, oh, well, we've got this basic form that like all the forms are just like this one. They just have additional things or a couple of slight differences. The problem is when somebody comes around and they say, oh, I actually don't like that part about the basic form. And this will happen. And so you have two options. You can either take it out of the basic form and then tell everybody to go update and add that back, or you can complicate the basic form so that it's configurable like that. And so like that way is easier up front. And so that's typically what happens. And then that basic form just gets really complicated. So yeah, just be really careful of that. Okay.
It's definitely like a hard problem to solve. And I just wanted your input too, just because something that I'm trying to solve, and I don't see I don't think there's it's like one of those cases that any approach that I take, there's always drawbacks that are not ones that I'm comfortable with yet. So I'm just trying to see one that I'm comfortable with, like the implementation and the drawbacks that it has.
Yeah, totally. I gotcha. Yeah, it's tough. Good luck. All right, Lynn has a question answering this now. Okay, trying to migrate my work project to Remix. That's exciting and kind of lost on how to do forms of steps. The app has like 5 steps of forms, and the actual call to a database is the last step. So the first steps are the data filling steps. I'm indecisive between separating forms to different routes or conditionally rendering on a single route. What would be your recommended method? So there are a couple of things to think about when you do routes. Remember that one of the awesome things about URLs is that you can deep link into a specific part of the form. But if it's like a form where you need to go beginning to end and there's no like persistence in between or saved progress or something, then being able to deep link into a specific part of the form probably isn't all that useful, except for being able to like, I click on, or I fill this out. Oh wait, I need to go back, and being able to use the back button to go back and make changes. That should work. And that might be benefit enough. So it kind of just depends on the way. You probably have like breadcrumbs or something too, and so they can click around, but being able to use the back button would be cool. The biggest challenge with that is, well, now I've got, I have to have some sort of state persistence so that the user can unmount this component, this form for this step, and mount a new step. So I need to like save those values somewhere, right? Because with the default with Remix is you don't put any of that form into state, and it just gets submitted when we submit the form. And so something else that you could do is you just have, boy, it's kind of hard to describe. I can show you though. We're doing this on my website. Oh yeah, and I presented last night. So we're light mode right now. Whoa, I gotta turn that off. It's blinding me. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. Okay, I will bump it up just a little bit though. So on my talks page, and I'll show you what it looks like first. My stomach is grumbling. I forgot to eat breakfast. Whoops. On my talks page, you can go to any of these and then you can click on one and it will scroll you there and it updates the URL. So that's like an actual route, but nothing else on the page has changed, except it bumps me up to the top. I need to fix that scrolling problem. Whoops. Yeah, so the way that this works is actually kind of tricky. We have a talks slug. Hold on a second. Oh, right. And this just exports a meta function so that I can control the metadata for if I share this online or whatever, so I can have the title of the talk for the image, the social image. So anyway, that's all that this does. It doesn't actually export anything else. So technically this is a resource route, maybe, I don't know. Resource routes weren't introduced when I was doing this in the first place, but anyway, it works. So you basically have an empty module that could be the specific route for which form is active. And then in the talks page, we don't even render an outlet. So it's not a parent of anything, or at least it doesn't render an outlet. And what we do instead is we have Oh, hold on a second. Do we have search params on this thing? Hold on. Huh, that's funny. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. Sorry, my screen just turned off. I don't know why we have search params. Query value. Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot. You can select these and that updates the query. That's what it is. Okay, anyway, so forgetting about that, that doesn't matter. What we're talking about is this right here, whether it's active. So we know what the active slug is based on our path name. And so we're just saying, hey, use location, get the path name. I think we actually might be able to say use params in here, maybe. I'd have to play around with that. I actually didn't build this part, so I'm not sure what has been already played around with or not. But yeah, so you can determine which form am I on, like I'm determining which talk I'm on, and that can decide, okay, so I'm putting this active thing around here. So all of that said, what you can do is you could say, I've got my form on this route, and then I've got children routes over here so that I can navigate to each one of them without having like a 404 or something. And then based on which one of those, like which slug I'm at or whatever, I can render that form, and the rest of them are still rendered, they're just hidden. So it all can be one giant form, and then you have sets of the different fields, but they're just hidden from view. So it looks like you're looking at an individual form for every step, but they're all actually in the DOM. So by the time you hit submit, that whole form has all of the fields for all of the steps, and it gets serialized and sent off. And what's cool about this is you can make this work without JavaScript too. Haha. So when I say work without JavaScript, what I mean is work when JavaScript fails to load or takes a long time to load. It'll work before JavaScript finishes loading. So anyway, that is an approach that you could take. I hope that makes sense and helps. Good luck. Okay, so Joe, oh, Joe, you're in the Zoom. Hi there. Sorry it took you so long to get to your question. So you've recently inherited an older code base, and there's a bunch of massive old class components that I've been avoiding working on. It's just kind of scary. I don't blame you. Do you have recommendations or resources on refactoring massive class components of 2,000 plus lines? Not that big, but I do have, let's see, refactoring React, I think is the short URL. Boy, I haven't used that one in forever, so no surprise there. Egghead, refactor, React, hooks. Maybe it's refactor React. I think it might be refactor React, maybe. Yep, there it is. So this is what I have for you. I made this when hooks were first released, but it's still valuable insights in here of how to take class components and refactor them to React components. I think Egghead, there may be another one, another course that is about this as well. So you could take a look at that too. But that's what I have for you. I'm sorry that it's.
I actually have some experience. I'm working now, and there's a bunch of class components. So what I usually do is like I get the class component and I create a function component on top, and then I migrate first the markdown, and then I get all the static data that it needs from it. If it's state, I'll look at all the state that it has on the class component. I'll look what can be derived state instead of like actual state, and then I'll look at the side effects, and I just mostly fill in the gaps from what the component needs to render. And then I'll keep switching back and forth to see if the functionality matches. That's how I've been doing it so far, and it's been successful.
Yeah, and it helps a lot if you have tests in place as well, especially on a component that's like 2,000 lines long. I would definitely recommend trying to get that tested before you refactor it. Cool. All right. That's fun. Thanks, everybody. That was all the questions. And we're over time, so I'm not going to ask for more questions. If you have more questions, then you can post here in the Discord, and we'll get to it next week. I should be able to do this next week. Let me double check. I don't think that I have a cancellation next week. Yeah. So no cancellations until Christmas, or Christmas Eve, I suppose. But yeah, this was fun. Thanks for hanging out. And yeah, we'll see you all in the future. So long.